every day we build on a base foundation of the daily New York Times content, you know, arguably some of the best out there.
Any site can actually be a channel and be broadcast rather than having to build something entirely new.
We build on it context for each of those stories with web annotations, multimedia, and application development, special original content, interactivity, games, and community development.
The channel's given us an opportunity to take that content and to package it in a much more dynamic, creative manner.
So it's really, we feel, a very solid news and information product on the web. In addition to that, we bring a lot of other information to the website that you can't find in print, and we do things that you can do only online to take advantage of the medium. What we really try to do is to develop many paths to the content that we have. Through navigating the CDF, people are able to navigate from a section of our site down to the article level and really get to a story. Very, very useful. The utility factor in the CDF is what we really were excited about.
In terms of navigation, the CDF file allows users to find things on the site quickly and immediately. Rather than having to navigate through an entire site, users are now able to actually select from a list of topics on the site and jump directly to the area that they're interested in.
The site that we have on the net right now is a very strong site. It's very brand conscious, it's very handsome, it's very true to the keeping of the New York Times, and we want people to go there and we want people to experience it, but it also takes a little bit more effort. And I think that the true end user benefit here is that there's going to be multiple paths to Times content, and therefore we're going to get many more people getting at the stories that we create every day.
IE4 has many different built-in controls, like a sequencer control and a marquee control, as well as having the CDF, which is also something that's very easy to plug into and take your existing content and really get it out to the user in a seemingly new way without having to do an incredible amount of work.
The backend has definitely become a lot more important in the sense that we now structure the scripting of the page as well as the actual placement of images on the page. Now we can actually decide when things are going to appear on the page, not just how they're going to appear on the page and where they're going to appear on the page.
I think my advice to anyone who's trying to begin a channel is to actually not get too concerned about the technology, because the technology is in a way pretty straightforward. And we found that we were a little intimidated by doing this brand new thing in a short time frame, but it turned out that after a while, a lot of the creative ideas really were what was driving the process, and that the technology itself wasn't standing in our way.
I think the web is going to change, and I think that newspapers are going to be particularly challenged, because I think that the very interface perhaps is going to become far more cinematic.
I would tell people to not be afraid and to go ahead and start developing, start using the tools, get up to speed quickly, and then really try to be as creative as possible with the details of the project and what you're offering the public.
I think IE4 fulfills, for a lot of people, what the web sort of promised to be originally. I think a lot of novice users today come to the web with a lot of preconceived notions about what they're going to see. They're going to see animation, they're going to see multimedia, and I think a lot of people have been disappointed until now with what the web has actually offered. I think now, with IE4, we actually can fulfill some of that promise and actually give people what they expected to see all along.
Welcome back to Worldwide Live, the web the way you want it. Let's turn it over once again to our host, Robert Hess.
Okay, put your laptops down, turn off your cell phones, get back in your seats. You just saw the New York Times and their great introduction on what they're doing with IE4 and channels and stuff on their sites. And like we've been saying, this is Worldwide Live. And here to fill us in some of the information about what's going on in some of our other live sites throughout the world is back Leo. So Leo, what's going on? How are the sites doing?
They're doing great, and we are live right now in several spots in Europe. We have the small little town of Prague there with a sold-out audience of 600.
600.
They're live right now.
Yeah.
It's nighttime there, and they're more of the lounge, I think, atmosphere than the early morning cafe that we're having here on the West Coast. We're also live in London, Czechoslovakia, I already told you, Turkey, the UK, Switzerland, and several other sites in Europe. And we'll also be rebroadcast in Australia, New Zealand later in the week.
So maybe the next show we should maybe film live in Paris or something like that. I could deal with that.
That sounds good. We'll move the whole production over to there.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We're also live on the internet via NetShow, and that link can be found on our site.
Great. Thanks a lot, Leo.
Sure.
Now, we spent the first half of the morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you are around the world, talking about dynamic HTML and some of the design aspects associated with it. If you remember back to Joe's first demonstration he did at the top of the show, he talked about webcasting and the channel experience. Here to deal with more about that issue and how you can actually create a great webcasting and channel background on your site for your users is Castedo Ellerman.
Hey.
Hey. So, I mean, it seems like no matter what computer magazine I pick up or what browser article I might read, one of the big buzzwords nowadays is push technology or webcasting or whatever. What exactly is this?
Yeah, well, I would say probably the best way to introduce what all this webcasting is about is to relate it to a feature that we already all use in Internet Explorer 3, and that is favorites. So I know you've got one of your favorite sites over here, don't you, Robert?
Yeah, it's with a shirt like this, it's got to be the cocktail site from Hotwired.
So this is a site, you've got a favorite here, and this makes it easy for you to navigate to the site whenever you want. Now, with
and I check it often, too, because like once a week, they take and put up a new drink there, and I got to make sure what the drink of the week is.
They change it. So actually, one nice thing for you, I've got to imagine, is if you could know that the site was changed without actually having to navigate to it. And that's something that webcasting also provides. So not only can you find out that the site has changed without having to actually go to it, but you can also now visit the site while you're offline. Don't even have to be connected to the network. Now, I can show you how easy it is for users to actually get this to happen with one of their favorite sites. So it's just a matter of really stepping through a subscription wizard.
Okay, so you just basically picked it off the favorites and said you want to subscribe to it.
Exactly. Now, clicking Customize here, there are a few things that users will typically want to customize or tweak about the way that they're having a site being webcasted to them. Now, I mentioned you can detect whether sites have changed and have yourself notified when that happens. That's just one kind of webcasting that Internet Explorer provides. In addition, you can also have the site brought down and put locally on your machine so that you can view it offline, not connected to the network. Not only can you bring down that page, but you can also bring down all the pages that get linked to from that site. So maybe there's a page about a particular drink. By specifying how many levels deep Internet Explorer is going to crawl, we'll actually bring down that page. Finally, there is a schedule that users will want to specify, which basically is an indication as to how often that site is changing. So you mentioned it was weekly, was it?
Yeah, once a week.
Once a week. So you would want to specify a custom schedule, and you'd want to specify that it's actually a weekly schedule. And now the user is all set, and now you've got your subscription to the site.
And that's all there is to it.
That's all there is to it.
So, I mean, how is this working under the covers? What's actually going on down there?
Yeah, well, it's actually intelligent pull. We've heard a lot about push, and actually most push products out there, actually intelligent pull. So what we're doing behind the scenes here is on a scheduled basis, and we notice that the user specifies or indicates a schedule. We'll actually go to a site over the HTTP protocol, and as a regular browser, just bring down the pages and store it locally on your machine.
And so it's actually being pulled down into my cache on my system.
Right onto the
And so
cache.
that means like in an offline mode, I
Yes.
can actually have a laptop or something like that and I'm moving around and not have to be connected to the internet.
Not only that, but we also provide some UI assistance for users when they are in offline mode, something to kind of assist them since it's slightly a different experience because you're actually not connected to the network in that case. And that's just a matter of putting the browser into offline mode or work offline. Now, when you have this enabled, you'll notice that there is a icon in the taskbar that indicates that you're actually working offline. And you'll notice that on some of these links, there's a little icon here indicating that this link goes to a page that's not in the cache, it's not available for offline use. Now, any other links that go to a page that is in your cache will actually behave exactly as they do on the internet. So you just click on them, you'll navigate, and you'll never even know the difference.
So in the case of if I'd specified I want to go down and take this page in one level deep, automatically then all of the first links on this page would be accessible, but then the links beyond that would take have to actually be connected to
And
get
if you
to.
specify 2 levels deep, then you could actually click twice, and you'd still be able to view those pages.
So what does a website actually need to do to use the subscription stuff? I mean, do they have to add any code to their sites?
Actually, they don't have to do anything. That's what's great about this basic level of webcasting, is it works with any site. Any website that you want to webcast, you want it brought down to your PC, this works with it.
Because all the functionality is happening here on the client.
It's all specified by the user. It's all happening on the client. Yes.
Okay. Now let's say on this particular site, let's say I decided, okay, 1 level deep probably isn't deep enough. 2 level deep may not be needed. Let's just go 100 levels deep. Let's basically crawl their entire web server, and I say, let's do it, once every hour, just to find out whether things have changed. And all my friends do the same thing as well. I mean, that's like an awful lot of hits to the server.
Yeah, that's an awful lot of hits. Probably bring the server down. Luckily, we actually have some safeguards. So really, you can only go 3 levels deep and no more, just to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, even still, even if you go 3 levels deep and say maybe once an hour, I imagine you're probably wondering maybe even that is too much. But there are 2 basically de facto standards out there that are provided for search engines, so that if a site doesn't want a search engine actually be going onto their site and automatically pulling down web pages, there's something that they can put on their pages or their site so that the search engines, or now Internet Explorer, won't go there and pull the content down. And that's the robots.txt. And it's just a matter of putting a simple text file on your site or a simple meta tag with the name robots on the site. And when Internet Explorer goes to a site or goes to a page with those on it, we'll back off and we won't actually crawl the site.
So the same way that the websites can take and preserve their data from crawlers, stuff like that, knowing their information really isn't crawlable, they can do the same way.
Right.
So it sounds like we've got like an all or nothing approach. I mean, where either you take and allow people complete access to all your pages on your site, or you take and just cut them off at the knees and say you can't go any further.
Yeah, and this is actually where channel definition format and the more sophisticated or managed webcasting comes in. Now, to kind of introduce the concept or explain how this works and how we solve this problem is kind of if you were, say, inviting a club to party at your house. Now, what basic webcasting is if I picked some particular person in a party, in a club, and asked them, hey, can you come to the party? And who are all the people that you know, what are their phone numbers, so that I can go call them, ask them the same thing, come down, and what their friends are, and go through this process and kind of blindly wander through the club and try to have people come to the party. Now, what you'd really want is if there was someone who really knew who all the cool people are, because in this case, there may be people that end up coming to your party you don't want them to. There's one person, like maybe yourself, that had a list of who are the cool people that actually should be coming to the party. And I can just call you. You've got the party list, and you can let me know exactly this person, that person should come to the party and no more.
And those are all the people I invited out to our audience here, too.
Exactly, yes. Now, that is what CDF is. CDF is basically a party list for what pages should come down to Internet Explorer and be webcasted, rather than blindly going through each web page and kind of guessing at who should come or what web page should be brought and pulling that down.
So, what do they do to actually to participate with this information, though? I mean, how are they providing this on their site? I mean, once they understand how they want to do it, they've actually got to put it someplace.
Yeah, that's well, basically all of this information about what page should be brought down, even extra information such as what kind of schedule should be used for bringing down content, is basically metadata describing an existing site or existing content. We've really made an effort to reuse existing HTML and existing sites and only enhancing the experience by providing this metadata. Now, CDF is basically providing this metadata, and it's in that file, and that's what gets sent down to the client.
Where CDF stands for Channel Definition Format.
Exactly, yes.
Now, so is this CDF file, is this like some new Microsoft web format sort of thing?
Well, since it is basically just metadata, there is an existing standard already out there called XML, or Extensible Markup Language. Now, this is even being worked on in the W3C itself and is an official working draft. Now, what this standard provides is basically a way to provide all kinds of metadata, and because of this advantage, it actually has quite a lot of adoption among lots of companies in the industry, including even Sun and Netscape. And this is a perfect use for CDF. So CDF, Channel Definition Format, is just an application or a derivative of XML.
Okay, so let's say as a website author, I decided to take the time to actually create a CDF file to describe my website. Aside from merely controlling which files are downloaded and which files aren't, what else do I gain from that?
Well, there are a couple of things. One is specifying something like the schedule, so the exact schedule that content should be brought down, but also some really nice things as far as branding and being able to attract users to your site. Now, I've got a channel over here that shows this extra information that's really valuable to site authors. Now, you'll notice here on the desktop, we've got an icon on the channel bar here. And the channel I'm going to show you is a mock-up of the Wall Street Journal channel. And you'll notice there's a branded logo right there on the desktop for users to always see every time they minimize all their programs or start up the browser. Now, you'll notice there's a little gleam or a little red icon there. Not only do users see that there's a logo there and branded content, but they also see when it changes. So that will really draw them, whenever you have something change on a channel, really draw them to click on it and go visit their site.
So that's a hint to let them know that there's actually something new there, so they don't have to actually go there, check it out, read it, try to figure out
There's a
something's
real
changed.
reason for them to go visit this site or view this channel. Now, in addition to this rich customization of the logo, there's also the ability to specify hierarchy. So you'll notice here on the left pane here, or the channel pane, that I have these subchannels or subfolders and items inside, titles, and when I click on them, I actually view pages that I'll want to read. Now, this is a really nice thing to be able to do, since, say in the case of a Wall Street Journal channel, you might want to be able to index just a subset of the site based on a user's interests. So for instance, this channel here is a hypothetical, technology business subset of the Wall Street Journal site. And in my case, that's the kind of news that I read. And I can quickly see all of those titles and all of those items, those web pages that I want to see, and be able to quickly navigate to them through here.
So how does all this information actually get into the CDF? How do I specify that as an author?
Well, it's just a text file. The CDF is just a text file. You can just edit it even with Notepad. Now, it's so easy. I'll just go ahead and show you right here what kind of information, how you can insert it in a file. So, since CDF is a derivative of XML, there are a couple of standard constructs that you place inside a file, like elements and attributes, and you'll probably recognize them because it's very similar to SGML. So the most basic channel is simply one that has a channel element. And this is the basic elements that everything is contained inside of.
So now channel is a new element that we've created.
Well, since CDF is a derivative of XML, XML makes it very easy, and it's actually its intended purpose, to allow any derivative to add any tags or new elements that it needs. XML needs to be able to express all kinds of metadata or extra information. And by allowing these new elements like channel to be easily inserted, it allows for all kinds of information to be provided through XML files. Now, the most basic information, in addition to specifying just this channel element, is the page that's going to get navigated to when the user clicks on a logo or the right pane gets navigated to a page.
It's like the cover page for the site or something.
Right, yeah, it's like a cover page. And that is provided through this href attribute. So I will go ahead and put home HTML in here. Now, I'm probably going to be typing a lot of URLs in this CDF file. So what would be really convenient is if I didn't have to specify all these bases here, and I could simply specify relative URLs throughout the file. That is where the base attribute comes in. So now with this base attribute there, now the href that I've just written and all the other hyperlinks or the URLs that I'm going to specify in the file are all going to be relative. The next most valuable thing for a site author to be putting in their CDF file is probably getting that branding, that logo on the desktop.
Putting your badge out there in plain view for
Yeah,
the audience.
and something to really attract them to come to the site. And that is through the logo element. Again, we've got an href here, and luckily, since I did specify a base attribute, you can type in a relative URL. So I will go ahead and specify a GIF that I want to use. And also I need to provide some information about what kind of logo is this, or what size is it.
Now, what's this little slash thing on the end I see?
Right. Well, yeah, this is something that XML provides to all its derivatives. And that is a way for a start tag and an end tag. So in the case of channel, we have a start tag and an end tag, to be the same thing. And this makes it easy for parsers that may not know about a logo element or other kinds of metadata that are provided through new elements to know that they no longer have to be looking for an end tag. So by having this slash at the end of this element, Internet Explorer and other parsers of XML know that this is the whole thing right there. Now, the next bunch of features that we want to control and specify in a CDF file are all of those items that we saw. So when we clicked on that Wall Street Journal logo in the channel pane and we saw those items get expanded and we could click on them.
Kind of a sitemap sort of thing.
Yeah, this does provide a kind of sitemap to all the other web content that already exists and they can view in the right pane. And those pages are specified through item elements. Now, I'm making the CDF the party channel. So this is the CDF that specifies and lists out all the home pages of the cool people that we want to, say, bring to a party.
So you're going to put a homepage for everybody in our audience then?
Well, no.
That's about 10,000 people right now, I
Just
believe.
3 people in this case, since we don't want to be here too long. And this, like the channel element, is also a non-empty element that has a start tag and an end tag. Now, the text that we saw in the channel pane, the title, can actually be controlled in the CDF file. And that is through another element called title. So go ahead. This is Joe's home page. Page. And now, that title, that text that I just typed in, gets displayed in the channel pane. Now, I'll go ahead and make a couple of these. And instead of having Joe's homepage 3 times, I'll change it to some other people. So we've got Jim, and, not John, Jim. And I don't think this would be complete unless we had a J. Okay, so now we've got all of the items specified. And this gets a pretty basic channel that we can now put in the channel pane.
Now I noticed the channel you're showing earlier when you had mouse overs on the item titles, little headline bits, we had a little tooltip that popped up.
Right. Yeah, that's actually an abstract, and even that can be specified in a CDF. We have that level of customization.
You need to specify that?
No, you don't have to specify, but if you want that tooltip behavior, you can actually get it. If you don't specify an abstract element, we actually display the URL. And if you don't want the URL to be shown as a tooltip, then actually putting an empty abstract will take care of that problem. But in our case, we actually do want to put some text in here. So maybe Jim is cool, just to let anyone know if they're hovering over that Jim is indeed a cool guy. Now, this information, like title and abstract, can also be specified for a channel itself. And there are a few places in our UI where this kind of text will actually get shown.
And what if I also want to control the little page icon that's shown next to the item in the
Oh,
channel.
yeah. So right, we have a logo, so that's for the whole channel, and you can even do a logo for each individual item and each individual subchannel. And that's again just using the logo element again, but you need to specify a different style because these logos are of a slightly different size. So the logos in the channel pane are actually 16 by 16 images. And to get that behavior, you need to specify a style of icon. And let me go ahead and change this logo to be an appropriate one. And we've actually got quite a lot that we've customized here. And to get this rolling, actually get users to be subscribing to this channel is really quite easy. And the reason for this is that the way that we have users subscribe to a channel is simply by navigating to it. So if you put an anchor in any of your pages that maybe introduce the channel, when the user clicks on that, and if the URL points to a CDF file, we'll go ahead and navigate to it. Now, I know the URL of the CDF file that we just saved out, and I'll go ahead and type that in. And launching it like this is going to do the same thing as if you clicked on an anchor and you navigate to the CDF file. You can see we've got the similar kind of wizard that we have for basic webcasting with a lot of the same concepts. So, for instance, the two types of webcasting where there's the looking for changes and then there's the type where you're actually bringing down the content so you can view it offline. This is also provided in the channel, so you could say just look for changes or download the content in the CDF file. There are a lot of other things like screensaver and also controlling the schedule. And in this case, auto schedule means use a schedule in the CDF file. We'll go ahead and save this out. So now we're subscribed. We've got the page that we specified, and we've even got the hierarchy that we specified. And as you can see here, we've got the tooltips showing up. We've got tooltips for the items, and we've got the titles that we specified. And clicking on these actually navigates to the page that we put in, and all of these items point to different home pages for all of the people that we want to come to a party or pages that we want to bring down so you can view it offline.
Looks like these guys need to fill their pages out a little bit more than they have it already.
Yeah, they're probably too busy. That's what I bet it is.
Okay. So during the subscription part of it, they were talking about what to download and how to download and stuff like that. How can you participate actually in controlling how much is downloaded and when and where it goes? Right.
Yeah. In the UI, users can specify let Internet Explorer or a CDF file decide when's the appropriate time to bring down a file. And that also is metadata that kind of assists or describes the channel or site. And that is through a schedule element. So I'm going to quickly type in what a typical schedule element looks like. It again is an element with a start tag and an end tag. And there are mainly two key elements that you want to put inside of this. So there's a lot of other things that can be put inside, but there are two basic ones. One is interval time, and another is latest time. Latest time. And these are a matter of specifying time quantities like maybe 3 hours and maybe a day.
Yeah, it looks like you might have a little typo there in that.
Oh, really? Lastest, yeah, latest time. That's
Boy,
right.
these people, they're typographical errors. I don't
Latest
understand.
time. There we go. Okay. Now, it's a little complicated how this works. So I actually got a pretty sophisticated multimedia display of how this schedule tag actually works.
Oh, cool. On this other PC over here?
No, I've actually got it on the bar here. Oh, juice bartender, could I have a noodle?
Noodle, sure. We got noodles right here.
Oh, great. Okay. Now here, this is interval time. Now what the interval time specifies is just a time quantity that specifies the times during which the schedule is going to repeat itself. So let's say this apple represents the beginning, the very beginning of the scheduled updates. That'll be right here. Interval time specifies how much later we'll begin another scheduled update.
So
right
like in
here.
my cocktail site, that'd be a week.
Right, in your cocktail site, that would be a week, exactly. And that would be specified via interval time, say, specifying day equals 7. And then this repeats on and on again, specifying more and more times that the schedule is going to occur. Now, the latest time specifies a time quantity inside. So in our example here, we had 3 hours. So the latest time would represent a quantity of time of 3 hours. And what this does is it specifies from the very start of this scheduled interval a range of time that Internet Explorer will pick one random time to be schedule a download to bring down content. Now, why is this? Well, it's mainly because if you don't specify this random range of time to bring content down, you have every single subscriber out there to your channel hitting the servers at the exact same time. This can be quite a load. So by simply specifying the latest time, it's a really cheap way to load balance all the subscribers to your site. Now, this range of time specified by latest time actually gets repeated on and on, over and over, based on how frequent this interval time is making the schedule repeat itself. Now, all of these time quantities can be customized. So by simply changing the tags in the CDF file, you actually adjust this whole schedule. So let's take this interval time and make it a little shorter to be a more frequent time. So now we have a shorter period of time. And this whole schedule is going to be made more frequent because this schedule is smaller.
So it looks like about a 3-day cycle rather than the 7-day we had before.
Yeah, this is about, yeah, I'd say 3 days. And now all these latest times, these random intervals, also get adjusted based on these starting times. So it's this level of really customizing, adjusting the whole schedule that you can do with CDF.
So not only are you taking and assisting your users in getting the content down at the interval that's appropriate, but also you're assisting your server to make sure that you're load balancing or managing that window of opportunity.
Really easy way to load balance servers. Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Although I'm not sure all of us have noodles and hatchets around that we can take and customize our code with, but I suppose that would be called a design time control?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, exactly.
Okay. So once we've actually got this schedule down, though, what about taking and dealing with caching the information on the site? How do we take and actually focus on getting data there, but not necessarily all? Like you might not necessarily want all the pages coming down.
Yeah, particularly if you have a really large hierarchy. So you'll notice that we had kind of basically a sitemap in this hierarchy in the channel pane. It's actually been pretty large. And if you have a very large hierarchy, you actually don't want to bring down all the content. It might add up to megabytes of content. So to control what pages do or do not get downloaded is actually through a pre-cache attribute. So with this, we can actually specify for a particular item that this item, or really the page that this item refers to, should not be downloaded and put into the cache of IE, taking up disk space.
So it's presenting an item in the channel pane for specifying where to pick from, but it's not actually pulling the content down.
Right, saving space, but it still shows up in the channel pane, right? Now, this controls whether or not a page is downloaded at all or gets downloaded. There are some other attributes that we have that help assist in Internet Explorer making efficient use of bandwidth and not hitting servers too often. And that is actually the last mod attribute. So this is very similar, not the last mod. This is actually very similar to information provided over the HTTP protocol. How we use this is we actually know how often we pull down content or what times we've pulled down content. And when we retrieve a CDF file, we can look at the last mod and we can look at a date that's provided and decide whether or not this content is old and doesn't need to be re-retrieved or has indeed changed since last retrieval and we need to pull it down again. And this can even save a site from being hit at all. We don't even have to go to the site to ask whether it's changed.
So this is like the date that would be the last mod date of a GIF file or another HTML file that normally IE would have to ping the site for in order to find out whether to pull it down or not.
Right, it would have to hit the server.
Yeah. So let's say I had a website that I had some database that was managing it or some other program I'd written. I could actually programmatically build my CDF, and as I built the CDF, have it programmatically check the dates of all the files, fill in the last mod date, and that way the only file that gets pulled across is the CDF file at one time.
Oh yeah, dynamically generating CDF files in some automated way is actually a really valuable way to provide channels. All of this content could have been dynamically generated on a server through a server-side script. And as long as it returns the MIME type of CDF, Internet Explorer will recognize that as recognizes any other CDF file. Now that we've actually controlled schedule, day, and hour, and pre-cache and last mod, there is actually another similar trait, similar to pre-cache, that you can further customize in a CDF file. Now, with pre-cache, you basically are saying, I want the page in the channel pane, but I don't want the page brought down and put in the cache. The flip side of that is that I do want the content to come into the cache, but I don't want it to go into the channel pane. That is specified through a usage element. And that's specified underneath the item that you don't want to show up in the channel pane, but do want to bring it into the cache. And by specifying a usage of none, you get this behavior.
So here we're saying Jay is probably someone we don't want people to see the name of on the list. So.
Right, or you don't want to see him offline.
Okay.
Now, usage is actually used in many ways. So in addition to specifying that a page doesn't get downloaded, it actually enables the screensaver feature. So you notice when the user stepped through that wizard, they had the option of whether or not to choose a screensaver. Whether a screensaver is available is actually provided as just regular metadata through a CDF file. So I could pick one of these pages, in the case, let's say, actually, Jay's page, instead of something that shouldn't be viewed offline, is actually something that we really want users to see all the time on their screensaver. And that's simply done by specifying a usage of screensaver. Now, this is really valuable for site authors for obvious reasons, because now this regular HTML page, potentially greatly enhanced with dynamic HTML, is going to be used in idle time when, say, the user has gone away from their desk, and now when they come back, they're going to see all the things you can do with dynamic HTML on their screen.
And since dynamic HTML can do movements and fade-ins, stuff like that, it can actually look like a real screensaver, not just a static web page sitting there
It can look
on
great.
the screen.
Yes.
Now, with all this control that we're allowing people to do on scheduling and caching and having data come down that they're not necessarily seeing in the channel pane, well, I know nobody in our audience would do this. I can easily imagine that there could be some website authors that might say, well, gee, I want my site to come down to this guy's machine once an hour, and I want 100 pages to come down on that guy, and I just want to constantly be loading all my data onto his machine, so it's just right there at his fingertip, because I know everything on my site is just so important to him.
Right.
That's,
we do allow the user to override the schedule. So when we bring up this subscription dialog, we don't just subscribe them without asking them, providing any information. We'll show them what's the schedule that they're using. And if they customize and step through the wizard at the very end, remember there was an auto schedule and there's a custom schedule and a manual schedule. This allows the user to decide that either A, they want to specify their own schedule rather than the site schedule, or B, they don't want schedules to happen at all, and they can manually just update it themselves. And we have places in the UI where a user can specify a schedule by right-clicking and specify that update this channel right now.
So we're still letting the user have the final word on what happens from a schedule standpoint.
Yes.
Yeah, and even with the offline mode, that sounds like really exciting, because now like I can take my cocktail site, pull it down to my thing, and have all the drinks I possibly want there, go into a bar and just say, give me this one,
Yeah, I mean, if you're about to jump on a plane, you say update now, and you get all that latest content right then.
But a problem I can see with that is that a lot of these websites benefit an awful lot from their site sponsors, from the advertising banners they have and stuff. And so if I was taking and pulling down an entire website to my machine, that means hitting every single page on their website and pulling it down. So either that website's going to think I saw every single advertisement or every single page it might have, or they're going to say I'm just crawling and therefore I didn't see anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, well, we have thought of this scenario, and we do provide something so that this offline case basically is a non-entity for advertisers. And what we do is that we actually do on the client side exactly what happens on the server side, which is just to note every time a page is viewed or retrieved from a server or retrieved from the cache, just make a note of that. And when we do this on the client side, the next time we go up and we're going to retrieve the contents of a schedule, we'll actually send a log of all the times that the user viewed a page. Now in CDF, this again is something that you can specify, and you do it through a log target element. And in here is an href, and this will point to a page, say a site, and if there's a script on here, we will actually post this information, and the script can process the log that we send up. Now I mentioned posting in Internet Explorer 4. The only method that we support is to actually post the information, and you specify that with the method attribute. And finally, this can be used for not only offline viewing. So with the scope, you can say, I want to view this when the user is viewing it offline only, and only log that, or also log hits when you go to a site and you're actually viewing it even though you're connected to the network. This way you don't have these two scenarios where when the user is viewing it offline, you have to get this log that gets uploaded to a site and look at that, but then you also have this other log from the server that has the online hits. You have this one consolidated log that gets sent from all the users for online and offline case. And that specifies where the content gets sent. But this doesn't specify which pages should actually be logged. That is through a log child element that gets placed underneath all of the items that you actually want to log. Now, the only kind of behavior that we currently will support in IE4 is a view of a document. So the value you specify is always a document:\view. And for all of the items that you want to log, you just insert these in, and now you've got the whole thing working with everything that I've just added.
So in this way, you're actually kind of filtering out all the pages that might be on your site. You don't really care whether people hit on it, the ones that either don't have ad banners or the ones that have old content, stuff like that.
Yes.
So I mean, it sounds like a really great way to deal with the whole offline mode, the advertising banners, giving the user a really great experience when they're either connected or disconnected. Now, as I was saying earlier, we're getting questions from people, and we actually had a question here that was dealing with this issue, and I thought maybe I might take the time to answer it here. This is from Alan Bowl, and he says, don't you feel that by adding all the desktop streaming features, you are ignoring the average user who has no permanent internet connection? I guess this is kind of dealing with the issue of if you've got like, the streaming audio or the active data connectors and all this stuff going on.
Yeah, well, actually, this is really great for users, both online who have permanent connections and who don't, because of this offline browsing. So a page can now specify the group of pages that are valuable to be seen offline. And now a dial-up user, someone who doesn't have a permanent connection, can specify, I want this content pre-cached, so I actually view an entire site, all the important things, without having to be connected to the network for hours at end.
Well, that sounds really good. Do you have any final statements you want to take and let people know about when they're focusing on creating CDF files and channels for their sites?
Well, of course, the most important thing is just create CDF files. And Notepad isn't the only way that you can do this. There are actually a number of tools out there in the market, one of which is FrontPage. The new beta of FrontPage 98 actually has a CDF wizard in it. And if you have any front page web, you can actually use this to automatically generate, based on existing content, a channel and a CDF file. In addition to Microsoft's own, there are some great third-party product, like this one made by Expertelligence. It's called WebRactive, and it actually has channel support integrated in all levels of the product. Matter of fact, the project file format is actually a CDF file. So even if you're creating a website that's collection of web pages, a CDF file is already there. You already have one available to immediately make a channel out of. Now I've made a blank new channel here. You actually don't have to go through the trouble of having to add all these items and find where they are. WebRactive actually allows you to simply point to a folder and it'll automatically look for all the files that you specify. Even if you have subfolders, it'll create that hierarchy that we saw in some of the other channels, actually create that, and automatically generate this into a CDF file. Now, I had 4 HTML pages in that folder, and you can see they've been added to the CDF file. Not only can you edit the CDF file, but WebRactive makes it very easy to edit the HTML, and this is actually a really great dynamic HTML tool. It shows you a preview of the actual content when you double-click, and you can see here that all of the moving and all of the content you see on the page is actually right here in the product.
So tools like Front Page or WebRactive support this. If you've already got websites in existence, you can just kind of suck the stuff down and not have to code it all up yourself, especially sites that are really big, large sites. That's going to be a handy way of doing it.
There's also, just to kind of wet your feet and immediately generate a really simple CDF file, there's actually a page I can show you right over here that we have on our site. And by navigating to it, you can generate a really simple page in about a couple of seconds, and it's right there on the Site Builder Network.
So it's at Microsoft.com/workshop/IE4/CDFWiz.
Yep, and you just step right through it, and it will create a really basic channel for you.
So it gives you a good idea of what the capabilities are. You can experiment with some of the tags that you're adding for a CDF file and see how they actually affect your site.
Get the logo on the desktop.
That's the important part. Okay, well, thanks a lot. Were there any other final words you want to take and let people realize to focus on while they're working on CDFs?
Yeah, probably 2 things. Basically, in addition to writing the CDF file, there are things to keep in mind with your existing web content. So the question that the gentleman asked from the internet about offline scenarios, and one thing you do want to make sure if you are making a channel is make sure your pages are offline aware. So, for instance, if you have a job applet on a page and it needs a network connection because it's streaming in stock quotes or whatever it may be, if you want users to use it offline, then you want to make sure that that actually isn't being downloaded and pre-cached. Another thing to keep in mind is, since there is this standard mechanism for showing hierarchy or a sitemap, it's one thing to keep in mind when you have a site that you don't want to necessarily duplicate the hierarchy over and over again. And just keep in mind that now there's this navigation bar, this channel pane that users can use in a standard way.
So use that automatically to display the sitemap, and then use your page itself to display the information you're wanting users to see and navigate to in just a short distance.
Yeah, just the content.
Well, thanks a lot, Castedo. We appreciate it a lot. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of channels coming out of this.
I hope so. It's really easy to do. Thanks.
Now we cut to another one of our In the Spotlight sections. This one is from MSNBC. Let's take a look.
MSNBC's business is using the web to tell stories, to tell news stories. IE4 is going to let us do that in a more dynamic way, a more compelling way, a more inviting way than we've ever done before.
MSNBC has developed a number of different ways to get information to our users. And we've got News Alert, we've got personalization, we've got an email delivery product. IE4 offers us a new tool to really take all of that functionality, combine it into one thing, one channel, and then provide it to our users. So it's very easy, kind of a one-stop shopping thing for people who want to use MSNBC. We also think it's interesting from an advertising perspective because for advertisers to be able to reach people where they work on their computer screens is something that today they can't really do. I mean, today with a website, I have to go to the website, be viewing it, and get the ads. Now we have the opportunity to send down information as well as advertising right to somebody's desktop.
IE4 will also let our users download MSNBC stories, MSNBC video, audio while they're asleep. So you won't have to wait for something to come onto the page. You'll wake up the next morning, flip on your computer, and there will be MSNBC's morning edition ready for you to read.
There's 2 things that I really, really like, and one is our news browser, because I think that the cascading menus I just think it's a absolutely great way to navigate, because for me as a designer, it doesn't cost me in terms of the real estate. And the other thing is just our fronts, our cover page and our section fronts are so much more just graphically rich.
At MSNBC, we've been very focused for the last year on how to personalize the news to each user. So our first question was, when we saw the channel model, how do we personalize this new channel model? So for us, what we were looking at is this ability to take the active server pages and be able to generate CDF on the fly for each user as they came along.
Our readers don't necessarily want to call up a web page to get the news that they're looking for. For sports fans, for people who are following business, we're going to offer active desktop objects that let you track the scores of your favorite teams, let you track stocks, let you track the business stories that you care about without ever going and opening up a browser.
So we wanted something that was going to mesh better with our television presence. So what we were looking for was a site design that would be more dynamic and more integrated and would really jump off the screen more. So we were able to use a lot of the features of IE4 and web design to be able to make a more dynamic presentation. On the far right, you see the slides. What those do is cycle through all the top headlines of the day, and users are able to personalize those to their own taste. In the upper right corner, you see the personalized current conditions for your region, or actually your city. Those update every hour, and we put those in using an ASP server-side script. In the upper middle of the section, you see a breaking news headline. That's a Java control that, in this instance, is giving off headlines that are breaking news that we haven't built full stories for yet. In the far left side, you see an ActiveX control that manages our navigation for the site. By mousing over this, you get a cascading list of all the various stories that are on the site that day, and by mousing to the story you want and clicking, you can jump directly to that story. So you have a one mouse motion way of navigating to any story on the site. One of the important things that we've done is take advantage of the CDF file. For a bunch of other tools that we built over the last year, we've had to build indexes of the site. Now with CDF, we can bring those all together into a single file format. We can talk about that to our outside customers as well, so that anyone who needs to be able to index into our site can use the CDF as a way to find everything that's on the site. At the same time, we can build a personalized CDF for each user, so that when they subscribe to the MSNBC channel, they will get a unique list of the stories that matches to their tastes and interests.
Right now, you have choices, but for every different website you might have to go to, you have to learn a new interface, a new way of interacting with it. With IE4, that's going to be very easy, and so somebody can change from one to another based on what they care about and what they're interested in. It makes it a lot easier to use.
Well, okay, so now we've covered the channels. We also covered dynamic HTML. If you remember carefully, Joe in his demo this morning was also showing some extremely exciting stuff that's happening on the desktop with Internet Explorer. Here to tell us how that focus can be used by websites and how you can participate on the desktop of the user is Chris Brown, a program manager from the IE Dev team. So Chris, for a while now, I've been hearing talk about Windows and this active desktop thing, and Joe called it like true web integration.
Sure.
What exactly does that mean?
Well, as Joe mentioned this morning in the demo, there's a number of benefits that we get out of taking the aspects of the web and applying them to the Windows Explorer and the Windows desktop. And one of the key benefits is easier navigation. So by having single click and back and forward everywhere, I have one common way to experience all of my information that I care about. And a second key benefit of the notion of true web integration is the idea that I can really customize and personalize my environment. And that's one of the successes that we took a lot of feedback on from Internet Explorer 3. And so we've really tried to expand on that concept with IE4. And the third key benefit is related to that, and that's the notion that I can have easier access to the information that I care about. And that's done through rich personalization and a simpler navigation model. So there's all those end user benefits, but I personally think that one of the best benefits is all of the great, cool new content that we're enabling with true web integration.
cool new content. I mean, everyone's saying, their site's got cool new content stuff. What exactly are you meaning by cool new content?
Okay, so the specific thing that I'm thinking of is the active desktop. And what I'd like to do is actually kind of explain what's the idea behind the active desktop. Why are we messing with the desktop? So there's some things that I really like about my desktop today in the Windows 95 world. There's the notion that I can put shortcuts on my desktop and little tiny links to all of the places or the applications that I run all the time. So it's a great launching pad. And on top of that, I can really personalize that environment by putting that wallpaper behind there and really make it feel like my own personal space instead of just a machine. So what we've tried to do is actually look at how the web, when I start to put web content on my desktop and web shortcuts, it kind of starts to break down. And what I'd like to do is actually show you on this machine that I've got set up here. So as we can see down in the lower left-hand corner, we have 4 shortcuts that I've actually created on my desktop. And I put them there by browsing to a website that I care about and choosing File, Create Shortcut from the menu. So let's take a look at what we've got. Now, the first thing that I'll notice is that all of these links more or less look the same. They have the same icon. So that kind of makes it hard for me to tell exactly what I'm going to be clicking on. I really have to be careful and read the text. So then I read the text underneath these things, and I see fairly verbose title, welcome to MSNBC, so on and so forth, Rolling Stone. It's kind of hard to actually read exactly what I'm going to get once I click on that shortcut. And in fact, you might see over here, Internet Explorer 4. Well, that could be any number of things, but if I actually select the icon, then I'll realize that this is my personal team's homepage, my team at Microsoft at work. So the title is kind of not that descriptive. And of course, Internet Explorer is doing the best it can. It's grabbing the title tag off of the web page. So in order to create these shortcuts, then you can see that it starts to break down. So what we've done with the active desktop is really tried to leverage the strengths of the existing concepts and try to evolve them forward so that we can start to take advantage of web content. So let's actually go ahead and turn on the active desktop. And you'll start to see how these shortcut icons that I was pointing out earlier have started to evolve into things that give me more access to the information. So here's that link, the Rolling Stone site that I have up at the top here. And I can see that, the link, the shortcut that is taking up space on my desktop, the presentation of that shortcut is completely controlled by the author. And in fact, if I go down to another shortcut that I've replaced, I had the MSNBC icon earlier on my desktop, and now I have an actual snippet of a web page from MSNBC. And this is better than a shortcut because I can actually take a look at whatever headline that I care about and go directly to that instead of having to go to the home page and then navigate a couple of steps. So this gives me a way to get nice, concise summary information updated on a regular basis about the sites that I care about.
And all this stuff is living on your desktop as web stuff.
That's right.
That the site authors themselves actually participate with in helping you display the information you're wanting rather than just some icon that Windows happen to be choosing by default.
That's correct.
So how does all this stuff work under the covers then?
So that's a great question. The way that this works is that what we've done is we've taken that wallpaper space that you know and love today, and we now allow you to put more than just graphics or bitmaps. You can put any HTML file back there. So again, we leverage the use of the wallpaper, and you can still get at all of your other icons that work just fine today that point to my local resources. But now we take that wallpaper and let you put HTML back there. And on top of that, we've given you a quick and easy drag and drop way to carve that HTML file up, so I'm not limited to just having one single information source. I can actually grab and see at the same time information sources from a lot of different sites.
So by having now all of a sudden your desktop space now basically being a browser window or a web page like that now makes the internet just a total focus section of your Windows experience.
That's right. I can start to incorporate that into my experience with my desktop.
Now, an issue that kind of brings up to my mind is that I'm constantly reading about how with each new version of the browser that one of the biggest things people do is try to find out the security holes and stuff like that.
Sure.
And so, so whenever I think of internet and browsing the web, security isn't far behind that. Is there any security problems going on by adding such a rich internet connectivity to the desktop?
Well, so we actually, as you might guess, get asked this question quite a bit. And the answer is, we think we've done a really good job with the security. Because we're using the same code base, there's one Explorer executable now, we can take advantage of that great zones feature that we have in the browser window to manage security relationships between different content. And if you know today, if I have different frame sets on a browser page with little tiny snippets pointing at different HTML content, those frames can only talk to each other, and the script in those pages can only talk to each other and find out about each other if they come from the same domain. And the principle applies here as well. So you might think to yourself, boy, you know, I have HTML sitting behind my icons. Can that HTML find out about those icons that are sitting on top of it? And the answer is no, because we effectively manage each one separately in a different zone.
So they're kind of like islands into themselves.
That's right.
They're just being the view of the information.
Exactly.
It's actually benefiting the user.
Yeah, they're very well protected.
So another issue this brings up, and kind of Castedo was talking about it with the channels and stuff, is the whole offline aspect. With so much internet information on the page now, what if I'm not connected?
Right, and that's another really good question. And so a lot of people wonder, boy, all of this great content, I must need to have an internet connection going all the time in order to take advantage of it. And the answer to that is no, you don't, because we, again, take advantage of the technology that we have in the browser and in channels. And we use CDF and subscriptions to keep all of this content up to date, offline, and you can also schedule it for regularly scheduled update. So we use the same CDF file. It actually turns out that each one of these snippets that I have on the desktop is essentially configured using its own CDF file. So the author can say, hey, here's my CDF file, and it describes content that is meant for the desktop.
So the same sort of CDF file that we use for channels, controlling the scheduling and the caching and the modification dates and stuff like that makes such a great offline mode, is the same information that's being used for creating these desktop items.
That's right. It's actually the same exact syntax that Castedo went over. And in fact, he mentioned earlier the notion of a usage tag. And we use this today in order to tag content as intended for the screensaver, for instance. So the way that the CDF works in this particular case is I have a CDF file with a usage tag that says, this is a desktop component. And that essentially identifies the CDF file as being particularly authored and designed to broadcast and to push desktop content.
Well, since this is a technical audience, can we maybe show these guys what it looks like to actually create a desktop item for their desktop?
Absolutely. In fact, what I did is I went ahead and mocked up a sample scenario that I thought might really illustrate the point. And so what I've done here is let's imagine that I have an HTML file here on my desktop, and boom, looks like we have a slight crash. Well, this is a beta software, isn't it? Let's go ahead and relaunch this. We're having some problems. Let me see if I can get this back. Okay. Well, essentially what I've done is I've gone ahead and tried to author a particular website that I thought might be a good sample for us. And so what I had to show was actually a site that had some ticker information at the top and some summary, some bullets later on in the HTML. And so what I'd like to do is actually kind of explain how I can take my existing content and go ahead and retrofit that for the desktop. So let's actually go ahead and restore my desktop. And I'm just going to go ahead and open up this HTML file into my Notepad editor. And again, it's unfortunate that we can't see this, but the structure of the site that I was about to show had a ticker running across the top. And so what we've decided to do is take that ticker and really pinpoint that as the smallest, most condensed piece of summary information that I might want to show to people. And so what I'm going to do is take this HTML file that describes my home page, and I'll actually notice that this object tag at the top is the one piece of HTML that I really care about that I'd like to have on my desktop.
So that was the stock ticker that you had there.
That's right. So there was a Microsoft investor stock ticker that I've had on this page. And there's a bunch of other stuff on this page too, a bunch of tables of information and headlines and some quick stories that I might want to boil away and just kind of show the summary information, the ticker that I care about.
So this is basically the sort of page like a market analysis page might have on it, a lot of information on what's going on with the stock market. And someplace on the page they had a stock ticker that was floating through.
That's correct. And so what we'll do is we'll actually take the stock ticker and we'll have that as the piece of summary information that we want to put on the desktop. So I'm actually going to select that text, that HTML text, and I'll include the header part of the page. And we'll just go down and include the object tag. And let's go ahead and copy that to the clipboard. And I'll create a new document, and I'll paste it in here. And so what we're doing now is actually building the HTML file that's going to be hosted in the desktop. And so we have the HTML at the top and the object tag. And I'm going to go ahead and make this proper HTML file. Oh, let me actually change that. It is the body tag and the end HTML tag so that we have well-formed HTML.
So you're basically just creating a single standalone HTML file that just has that stock ticker on it.
That's right, because all the content on the desktop is a single tiny web page that we're going to host inside a frame. So now that I've gotten the HTML file more or less constructed, I'm going to tweak a couple of things. For instance, I probably want to get rid of all of the margins so that this thing can sit really tight and nice and constrained on my desktop space. Actually, the syntax for this is a little bit different. I'm going to use CSS style sheets to set the margins to 0. And I'll also notice, again, when we had the page up earlier, Robert, and we were looking at it, we noticed that the ticker actually took up a lot of the space of the screen, and I'm actually going to cut it down a little bit and make the width 300 pixels.
Yeah, because before it was on a web page all by itself, and now we're talking about having it actually share space on the desktop. So you want to try to work on getting things as small as possible.
That's right. And so now what we're going to do is we've essentially built the HTML using our existing content, not too hard, and we're going to save this out as an HTML file and put it directly on my desktop. So let's go ahead and save this as an HTML, and I'll save it as my active desktop item. We're not feeling too lucky today. I actually happen to have some copies of this up on my personal web server, so let's see if we can launch them. Let's see here again. OK, here we go. We're doing a little bit better. Oh, looks like I need to connect in order to see it. And let's go ahead and load it. In fact, let's see if I can even bring up a copy of my home page to kind of show the context of this thing. OK, that's actually not found. Well, essentially what we've done is we've taken this ticker that you can see clearly here inside the browser window, and we've compacted that down and put that into a little tiny web page. And essentially, when this gets shown on the desktop, it will be displayed in a little tiny space, obviously without all of these toolbars and status bars around it, because I just want to focus on the content. So we're already halfway there, and we've built the desktop item. And what we're going to do now is actually try to figure out, well, how are my users going to install this thing? And let me actually restore my desktop here. OK, so the way that we get this content onto the desktop is by using a CDF file. And what I've actually done is I brought along with me a sample CDF file that you can use as a template to put content onto the active desktop. And let's go ahead and drag that to Notepad. And incidentally, this CDF file happens to be on the sample CD that everyone's getting today. So you can see that a lot of the syntax looks very much the same as what Castedo showed earlier.
Yeah, there's a channel tag. I see the schedule tag, item, title, usage. I mean, all the same tags we saw before.
That's right. Yeah, it's largely the same syntax. It's essentially CDF syntax. And there's a couple of extra things that I'd like to point out. And what I'm going to do is actually modify this file and have it be ready for our specific usage. So I'm going to change the end date to a particular expiration date. And that's going to obviously control when the scheduling stops. And that's going to happen in sometime in 1998. And we have the interval time, and the earliest time, and the latest time. And I don't have a hatchet ready to kind of explain that again. But what we'll actually do is go ahead and customize the rest of this. I'm going to type in the web address that is the address of that page that I just built and put that into the item tag. And I know that that happens to be the following web address, and that's HTTP. It's up on World Wide Live 4. And it is my active desktop item. Let me actually change this to a slash. And I'm going to give my active desktop content a friendly name, because this will show up in a list along with other things that I'm going to need to configure the active desktop item. So let's call this my investor ticker. And earlier I noted that we have a usage tag that labels this CDF file as intended for a desktop component. And you can see that going on right in here. And within that usage tag, we can actually add some specific parameters that are designed to allow me control the presentation of this content on the desktop. So there's a pixel width that I can set. And I remember from editing my page just now that the pixel width of the ticker is 300 pixels, and the height is 34. So I'm going to go ahead and type those in. Now, another thing that I'll point out is this is just a CDF file, and I can continue to add other items to this CDF that describe other pages I may want to download in the background. And I can go ahead and set their usage to none so that they don't show up anywhere, and we'll still web crawl them. So you could imagine a scenario where I have a small desktop item with some headlines that link and point to these pages, and they're already offline because we've added them to the CDF. So let's go ahead and save this out. And we're going to save this on my desktop as a CDF file. And I'm going to call this myActiveDesktopItem.cdf.
You sure like typing those long names, don't you?
I do. You got to use long file names. And we're encountering the same problem that we had before. Fortunately for us, we love using beta software and finding bugs in it, and so on. But what I've done is, again, put all of this material that also happens to be on the CD up on my personal web server already, so we can just go to it. And so we've created the CDF file, and we've shown how that is pretty easy to configure, and I can point that to a small snippet that I already have up on my website. And now the only thing that's left, the last step, is for me to create a nice installation page where people can go to it and see the content that they might have on their desktop, and then give them a way to install it. So actually, up on my personal web server, let's go ahead and type in the address for that. There is this installer file. And this is a sample installation page that you might have, where you have the ticker. I'm actually giving people a preview of what they're going to put on their desktop. And then this is a link that simply points to that CDF file. And just by navigating to that CDF file, then you'll see that we get the user interface that comes up that I'm used to seeing already from installing my channels. And I can go ahead and configure the schedule from here if I like. And if I go ahead and press OK, then it's going to go and download that content and put it directly on my desktop. And you can see that it's actually gone ahead and done that. And I have my ticker showing up directly on my desktop. So that was pretty easy.
So, I mean, all you had to do then is basically create a small HTML file that described in this nice minimal snippet of a thumbnail of the file, then a CDF file that told out where to get it, what the schedule was, what any additional resource files might be for it, and the user could download it just with an anchor then.
That's right.
Well, I mean, I can see an awful lot of potential there here. I mean, we see the trip site here going on in one corner. We see a news page going on. We see the Rolling Stone. I'm sure the cocktail site might have my cocktail recipes that create a desktop
that would be there just for you,
well.
right?
Are there any sort of specific issues that site developers should be considering when they look at their websites and try to figure out how do I create a desktop item based on my content?
A lot of the issues are the same ones that you're going to encounter when you start to build channels and that kind of thing. For instance, Castedo mentioned that obviously we have to care a lot about having our content be offline aware. And that's especially important on the desktop because every time the user logs into their Windows shell, then they're going to see these things show up, and they may not have a connection ready. They'd have to dial out first. So all of this stuff, if I have Java applets or ActiveX controls, they need to understand and know how to work in the absence of a connection and at least display something reasonable in that space. And one other quick thing is obviously it's important to try to be careful about how much space you're taking up on the desktop because people are going to want to put many of these things on their desktop. And so there's a nice balance point to be reached of having your content be as rich as possible and still nice bite-sized enough for people to want to have it in a convenient way on their desktop.
Are there any sort of compatibility issues they need to be thinking about while they do this?
Absolutely not. In fact, when you start to put content together for the desktop, one of the nice things is that you don't really have to worry about backwards compatibility. Because this is a special platform opportunity that Internet Explorer 4.0 specifically offers you, then you can go ahead and just author specifically for that platform. And that means that you can really start to take advantage of it. And there's a couple of things that I might point out that are great things to keep in mind and take advantage of if you are targeting the platform specifically. So now I'm done just taking and retrofitting my old content. I want to make it better. What I can do, one of the things, is go ahead and have this content link back to my channel. So instead of launching a web page, I can actually have it kick off one of my channel sites. And another thing that you might want to do is actually take advantage of personalization information and really let the end user configure what goes on that active desktop item. And actually, the last point that I'll make is that active desktop content is a great opportunity to take advantage of dynamic HTML. And I think that there's two reasons behind that. Because dynamic HTML really solves two things for me that are specific to the desktop. One, it's going to let me get the most out of that little tiny piece of screen real estate that I've got, because I can use nice transitions and so on in order to pack a lot of content into that tiny space. And the second opportunity is that dynamic HTML really helps me cut down on the bandwidth that I might otherwise have to have all of this cool functionality and transitions going on. So it can actually make the data and the HTML that I download really compact and lightweight, which is the whole point of having stuff on my desktop.
It is, yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Chris. I mean, I can see how this whole channel, dynamic HTML, and active desktop things all kind of fit together to create a really fabulous user experience with Windows and the internet and HTML and scripting.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Go have a juice, and we'll see you later. Now, we've been talking an awful lot about, dynamic HTML and how you as web authors can create these great HTML capabilities and what happens in the browser window and stuff like that. There's some technologies going on behind the scenes that are helping an awful lot with making this be as seamless and easy flowing as possible. One of those technologies is something called direct animation, and our web browser is using that an awful lot to make the screen updates happen fast and furious. There are actually ways that web authors can make use of direct animation on their web pages. And here to help show us some of those ways is Karl Jacob from the Liquid Motion team. So, Karl, I understand you came from the Dimension X team.
Exactly, and now our team is here working on Liquid Motion and integrating Liquid Motion with direct animation.
So now, direct animation, I kind of introduced the audience to that term earlier. Can you maybe explain a little bit more what exactly direct animation is?
Well, direct animation is really a media integration layer. So direct animation allows you to take all these things that used to be pieces on the web page or separate like text and video and audio and graphics and integrate them into an experience. It's much like the kinds you find on broadcast television or even in movies.
So what sort of effects can that actually look like then?
Well, I think we have a clip that we could take a look at.
Let's take a look. Okay, so this was direct animation in action.
Exactly.
Now, what sort of effects does that actually allow the web author to get into, though, and how is that important to them?
Well, what's really great is that direct animation supports 2D, 3D, audio, video, pretty much everything you've been used to on the desktop or in the latest and greatest games, but now inside of your web pages. As a matter of fact, here we have an example that you'll probably recognize from the demonstration. This claw that's actually in this page is a 3D object. Now, this is only 23K. And I want to emphasize the fact that a lot of times you see these really great, fantastic effects on web pages, but you say, well, it's going to take me 3 years to download that over modem line. But this is 23K, and the demo you saw earlier, which actually also plays inside of a web page, is only about 220K total.
So what you're seeing here exactly is just the definition of the object itself, and then the information to animate it. So it's not like a movie that needs to be playing frame by frame.
Absolutely. This is actually a good way to look at this is the next generation of vector graphics.
So how does this actually translate well into web pages? I mean, and the web author can actually add this easily to the page, or they have to have a separate control sitting there, or does it actually live within the HTML?
What's really great about this is not only is it a control that gets into the web page, but also we have an authoring tool called Liquid Motion that generates this. So let me give you a quick example of kind of how it plays inside of the HTML world. Right here what we have is a standard HTML tag. This is just a piece of text. And right here is actually a piece of liquid motion animation generated by the tool. It's not really doing anything, but what this shows that we can actually reach outside of the animation into the page and allow the tool and the animation to control what's going on in the page. So if I click on this, it actually moves the tag. So what we're talking about now is not just multimedia that sits in this little box inside of the page, but multimedia that literally reaches out into the world of the browser and interacts with all those different pieces. So
earlier today, we saw Michael Wallent take some HTML code and fly it across the screen by setting its pause position within script code in the HTML. So what you're doing here is your liquid motion animation has a path within it that it's maintaining, but rather than animating some graphical object within that liquid motion object, it's actually affecting the dynamic object outside on the page.
Absolutely. And an example that we might want to look at that gets a little deeper into this is that here's an example of our tool creating a control and then exporting that functionality outside. So this path was exported outside and is now scriptable. And if we take a look at the source here, since we're having a lot of fun looking at source code today, you'll see down here that rather than being the kind of closed world that you had before where you have to put these controls on the page, you couldn't do anything with them, right here in the HTML, we're actually pulling that spline path behavior out of our animation engine and allowing the author to do different things to it. In this case, they're actually applying it to a piece of HTML text.
So here the script's yanking it out because the animation engine you're utilizing has some pretty fancy spline path animation stuff it can do.
Right,
and so you can actually predict it. So you could actually even have an animation going on inside of your object and then have text on the outside that is mimicking the behavior or flowing against that, even synchronized with it.
Exactly.
Well, I can see how this is pretty exciting. Now this is all built into IE4, right?
Absolutely. This is part of IE4 when you download it from the net.
So all this animation capability can be immediately accessed by anybody that wants to access it.
Yes.
What about the problems of having some backwards level compatibility?
Well, one of the things that we stressed a lot when we were at Dimension X and now at Microsoft is really making sure that the experience that people have is possible on all types of different browsers. So what happens is we actually publish a version specific to IE4 that we like to call the THX version. It has all the hottest features and all the latest and greatest effects. We also publish a Java version that runs on any browser. So you can look at this like being able to go to a movie in kind of an older movie theater, and the effects are okay, and the stereo sounds pretty good. But then you go see that movie in a THX movie theater, it's quite a different experience.
So Microsoft is now providing a tool that's not only IE4 focused specifically, and it's going to work faster there because it's used like direct animation, but also Java capabilities.
Right.
What does this tool look like? How does the user actually get into it?
Well, let's take a look at that. So here's the tool. It's pretty simple. The metaphor really is of timing. So time is very important inside of liquid motion. And let's say we just want to add an image, and I can browse around on my disk and find an image. Now I'm not an artist, so this is probably not going to look very good. But here's our little image, and we can drag it across the screen. And let's say we want to actually make that image move across the screen. Well, that path looks okay, but maybe I want to change it, so I just kind of move it around. I apply the path, and then I just hit play, and it moves across the screen. Now what's great about this is when I'm finished, I just go to the File menu up here, and I hit Publish, and Liquid Motion takes care of everything. It generates an HTML file that you can include into your HTML page, and it generates the Java version as well as the direct animation IE4 version.
So it allows designers that are more familiar with working with the visual type tools to actually publish HTML at the same time.
Absolutely.
But it publishes HTML that HTML authors could go in and then tweak, add their own connectivity to dynamic HTML, whatever else they were needing as well.
So this is me being pretty lame at authoring things. Let me show you something that's a little bit nicer. So here we have a totally integrated page. This is a cat who's kind of looking around the room right now. And you'll see that he's actually spying on these fish. Now what's interesting about these fish is that rather than all of this being frame after frame animation, these fish each have an individual behavior that is powered by liquid motion. So you can imagine when the cat takes a swipe at them, each one of them does a different thing. He's pretty brave, so he just sticks his tongue out. This one is really friendly, blows kisses at the cat. I don't know what's up with that. And this one just kind of turns around and ignores the cat. Well, this is a pretty smart cat, and he's not going to take much of this for long. So he brings out the big guns, in this case, the big chainsaw, and decides to deal with the situation. Now you'll notice, as the water goes down, each one of these fish has a different behavior as how they're dealing with this. Now those behaviors are actually like templates. You could apply those to thousands of fish inside of the tank. And the idea here is that a lot of what we're doing today in animation is something that we can apply over and over again. Imagine that you have a corporate logo and you want that logo to come onto the page in a certain way. That's kind of your effect. The way you want people to remember your logo is the way it enters the web page. Well, you might want to change your logo over time, but not the actual effect. And you can do this in Liquid Motion very, very easily.
So you're actually separating the animation and how the animation is played back on the screen then.
Right, exactly. And saving download in the process, because now rather than having frame after frame of animation and downloading all those images, what we download is a few simple images and kind of an intelligent way of telling those images what to do.
So how do people actually get a hold of this tool then to use it?
So it will be in beta out on the Microsoft web server and available through Site Builder in September, along the same time frame as IE4. And next year, it's going to be kind of the newest in Microsoft's web authoring solutions focused on the multimedia sector.
Now, if I was an HTML author and the capabilities it's exposing as building HTML pages up, are there things I could actually access to direct animation directly, or is it something I'd really want to have a tool doing a lot of this stuff for me with?
Well, it depends on who you are. If you're building an authoring tool, you could build an authoring tool on top of direct animation. Or if you're building something that's very, very complex and requires a lot of complex functionality, and you don't want to kind of use a tool to create that, then you could program directly to the direct animation API, and you can use VBScript, you can use Java, JScript, whatever you like. Of course, you could also use the authoring tool, which really gives you a visual way of creating these experiences without any of the penalty that you normally get with an authoring tool, because you can always reach in through script and grab the things that you want.
Okay, so direct animation itself is not necessarily what we'd call an HTML standard per se, and there's not some nice easy set of tags to get to it. It still is a little bit more of a programmer's realm, where you actually need to have some tools like that, either tools to help you, or if you're a C programmer, someone can actually write to the API level yourself to do it in that fashion. Well, what about like on like the Macintosh platform, for instance? Are there any issues for that?
So the great thing about the Macintosh platform is that we will have a version out about a month after the Windows version goes out the door, and that will also track with IE4 versions that are going to come out on the Macintosh.
Well, that's great news, because I know a lot of the people in the audience are website designers that are probably using the Macintosh and stuff, and so they want to have access to our tools as well.
Right, absolutely. And it'll play back on the Macintosh as well, I should note. So it'll play back on any platform. It's just the tool will come out a little bit later for authoring on the Macintosh platform.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Carl. Any final words you want to take on off our audience about how to make the best use of these tools?
I think get out there, grab the tool during the beta period, let us know what it does right and what it does wrong, and create great animations.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have one more spotlight issue, and this one is focusing on Microgroove and how they did some stuff for the Rolling Stone.
What is Rolling Stone?
It's just not something you'd seen on the web before.
What would we like to see as fans, and how we could make that exciting with IE4?
When the user comes to the Rolling Stone channel, we really want them to be captivated.
The story really starts with the garage sale, and the fact that Steve had all of these magazines boxed up and about ready to be sold.
We had our designers go through the magazines to find interesting page layouts, things that would give us our inspiration for creating the channel.
Initially, the most challenging thing with the process was we had all this compelling, great content, but there was so much of it. And what we needed to do, and quickly, was to pretty much put it through a funnel into a really precise, tight sitemap or blueprint for what the channel would be.
So when we got together as a group, designers and developers together, we all tried stressing to each other that you could do practically anything in terms of layout
showing and hiding elements, moving elements on the page, changing the quality of elements, whether it's the size or the color. Really, your imagination was the only limitation.
There are two big revolutions for us in designing for IE4. That's absolute positioning and layering, Z-order. IE4 allows our developers to realize our designers' vision. Our designers think in multi-layered and three-dimensional terms, and we can now create that within the web page. There's so much movement enabled in IE4, but we want that movement to be associated with user interaction. So the user feels like they're controlling it, that they've done something and aha, there's a movement there, so this means there's something in there for me. We didn't want screens that were just screaming with movement all the time, and then it's just noise. We want it to be something that the user controls.
We have lips that move. We have David Byrne's face disappearing and reappearing. We have things spinning in from the side of the page. We have text rotating.
What happens with the loose lips icon is when a user mouses in VB Script, we're controlling the dimension and the placement of the GIF on the page using a sequencer. So the sequencer hits that GIF in a determined amount of time. And every time it hits it, it's feeding it both a new dimension and a new location. So you see the lip kind of jumps around like this. Every time you see it jump, it's getting a new dimension, new location. So the lips appear to stretch and bounce around. But it's just one static GIF being manipulated through VB Scripts. But of course, you can't forget the main page and Evie's running rats. I mean, that's technology-wise, it's just an animated GIF, but what a perfect icon for exercise and futility.
This is all in IE4. There's no flash animations, there's no shockwave. We were able to accomplish this all with the multimedia controls and the object model that Internet Explorer 4.0 affords us.
Finally, as a designer, we were able to translate our design ideas, not only what we wanted the page to look at like, but also what we wanted maybe the type to do, because there's so many great filters, and we could translate that to development and have development produce it at 100% what our vision was.
Now, when you combine actual pixel-accurate positioning with style sheets, it allows a degree of precision that is incredible and really allows our designers to know that when they want something to appear with this leading or this letter spacing or this margin value, that I can fulfill that.
One thing in designing the IE4 channel for Rolling Stone magazine was a further blurring of the design and development sides of our shop. The designers could not only say, this is what we want a page to look like, but this is how we want a page to appear over time.
We use the technology to enable the design and not vice versa.
Well, we've been doing these email questions throughout the day, and I've got another one I want to share with you. This one's from Justin Delabar. He asks, what is different about Memphis? And by Memphis he means what we call now Windows 98. All that I've heard and read is that the main difference is IE4.0's desktop web integration. Is that so? Or what types of different features are showcased in Memphis? Well, earlier today we took and had Joe demoing what Internet Explorer 4.0 was and its great web and desktop integration looked like. And so it's probably only fair to let Joe also demo what Windows 98 is going to look like and how it's going to bring even new things to the Windows experience. Take it away, Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Belfiore, back here again to give you a quick look at Memphis and show you how Memphis adds even more to the ease of use that the IE4 shell brings to Windows. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick look at Memphis. I want to point out two top-level things about Memphis. The first is that we think that Memphis, or Windows 98, will be a great Windows 95 upgrade. And the reason it'll be a great Windows 95 upgrade is that it's easier. It makes lots of things that you do in the environment easier. It's more reliable, and it's faster. So those are the three reasons why, if you're running Windows 95 today, you'll want to move to Windows 98. And besides that, besides just being a great Windows 95 upgrade, we think that Windows 98, through its support of lots of new hardware types, it opens up the doors for new types of computing. And I'll give you a quick look at what I mean by that. First thing, let me jump in and show you a little bit about Windows 98. What I'm looking at here is a Windows 98 machine. As you can see, the desktop here really is the IE4 shell with true web integration turned on. I have single-click activation, and this works exactly the same way that IE4 does, basically. But besides that, there are a few other things that Windows 98 includes to make things easier for users. One quick example is how help in Windows 98 includes both local help files that you can ask questions to, web resources for help, and even support engineer type help. So one example here of how you might use Windows 98 to get help for things that you're having trouble with in a hardware sense is the Windows Update Manager. So let's take a look at this. The Windows Update Manager basically is a smart piece of software that sits on the web and takes a look at your PC to determine whether there's new software updates available for the hardware that you have installed on your own machine. So here I am accessing through help the Update Manager, and what it's doing is it's looking at the hardware I have installed on this PC, and it's telling me that, for example, there's a new compatible S3 driver available. I can see all this information here, and if I want to install it, I can just click there. So the Update Manager basically is about the Windows 98 itself being smart and using the web to help you keep the components of your operating system up to date at all times. That's one example of how Windows 98 makes things easier and even a bit more reliable. Let's take another example. What I'm going to do now is show you the Windows 98 Tune-Up Wizard. The Tune-Up Wizard is about making your operating system run more reliably and faster. And this will run when you set up Windows 98, and you can run it any time thereafter. And what it does is it sets up your system to automatically configure itself to be more reliable and faster. So let's just take a look at the wizard. The first thing that it will do is offer to optimize your hard disk to free up disk space and make it faster. What it'll actually do is lay the disk sectors out on the disk so that you'll get maximum boot time and so that any unnecessary files will be deleted. So here's that first step. You might notice, too, that I can choose to schedule a later time to optimize and even have this happen periodically. The next thing that it offers to do is speed up your applications. Again, there's technology in Windows 98 that can make launching programs even faster than they launch in Windows 95 by laying out the hard disk so that consecutive disk sectors are read as the disk is spinning by, so applications launch a bunch faster. And again, you can have this happen periodically so that the system is continually tuning itself to work best for the applications that you use as those change over time. The next thing the wizard asks is whether it should scan your hard disk for errors, and it will do that. It'll offer to do that regularly. And finally, the wizard will offer to delete unnecessary files on your machine, files that are in a temp directory and so on. And again, it'll offer to do that periodically. The wizard summarizes what all its steps are, and then when you click Finish, it'll go off and do those things. There are actually a whole bunch of other pieces of Windows 98 that do similar things in terms of making your system run more reliably and run faster. And those things, combined with the ease of use of the new IE4 user interface and other ease of use enhancements, are what we think makes Windows 98 a great Win95 upgrade. Now, if you just stopped there, you can already see why, as a Windows 95 user, you get a lot of benefit in going to Windows 98. But as soon as you open the door to new types of hardware, the story gets better. For example, Windows 98 offers support for USB, which is a new hardware standard that includes features like hot plugging of devices, so they'll immediately be available, and two-way communication between devices and the PC, so they can be configured really well. It also offers support for IEEE 1394, which is a higher bandwidth communication for doing things like home theater. DirectX 5 offers new 3D capabilities if you have a 3D card, and it also supports DVD. I want to give you a couple of quick examples of some hardware support that we really think will provide real benefits for end users right away. Here's a simple thing that I've done. All I've done here is I've taken and added a second video card to my Windows 98 machine I've been showing you all along, and you can see right here what I really have is one great big desktop. So here, let me bring up one of these windows, and I'll give you an example. I don't know if this is being shown on your screens or not, but if I take this window and move it back and forth across these two monitors, you'll see how easy it is for you to be able to get up lots of different things. You might have more than one web browser, and for those of you who are web authors, you can really see how this would be useful because you can put a browser on one screen to show what your page looks like and have your editing tool over here on this screen where you're actually doing your editing. It makes it a lot easier, and all you need to do is add another video card and a second monitor, and you can make your existing PC do a lot more work for you. The next thing that I want to talk about is if you add a TV tuner card to your PC. Windows 98 comes with built-in support for TV tuner cards and does a lot to use TV broadcasting to make the PC experience more rich. The first thing is a simple thing. We've talked about webcasting today. We've talked about how CDF files define a set of information that should get downloaded onto a machine and stored in the cache so it can be used offline. Well, with Windows 98, we can use the TV tuner card to actually provide delivery of HTML via a TV broadcast, so ordinary websites get stuck in the machine's cache. So what I have here is an example of this. I'm going to go to the Microsoft Webcast channel and just give you a quick look at some of the things that we're doing in trial right now. This page is an example of, on our local CBS affiliate, Cairo Channel 7, we are broadcasting a bunch of websites via the vertical blanking interval of the TV signal. And if my PC has a TV tuner card, I can go to this web page and check off the different sites that I want to have actually captured in my cache while they're broadcast over the TV signal. So I leave my TV tuner tuned to Channel 7 in my PC all the time, and it's all throughout the day receiving these web pages and putting them in my cache so they're immediately available. As a site author, once you've supported CDF, you're done. You don't have to do anything else, and IE4's webcasting architecture and Windows 98's support for TV tuner allows TV broadcast to be one of the ways that HTML content is actually delivered. So that's an example of how the TV tuner can make existing tasks like going to websites and looking at things a much better experience for end users. And what I want to do now is show you how the TV tuner can change the role that a PC might have in your house and how it can make things like even watching TV better. So I'm going to walk over here to where we have a TV set up. And Robert, I'm going to have to ask for that remote control here so I can keep going with the demo. What I have here is appears to be an ordinary TV, but what this actually is a gateway destination PC. This type of PC has been available now for quite a while. You can buy one of these, and there are more than one company that's making it. The PC is actually back here, and it kind of looks like a big VCR. It's really intended for the living room, and it comes with a wireless remote control and a wireless keyboard. And what I'm doing here is actually watching TV, but the key thing here is that I really have the power of a whole PC. I can click on different buttons, and you can see how I get user interface that helps me work with the TV. What I also want to do is show you that underneath this is my Windows desktop. And let's see. Down here I have my taskbar, and I actually have my Windows desktop. It's hidden behind one of these windows. So let me go over here and click on the desktop icon, and there you'll see is my actual Windows 98 desktop. So really, I'm just using an ordinary PC here, but I want to show you how I can use it for tasks that are related to watching TV. So let me click back on the TV button, and we should switch back to our TV. Hang on 1 second. I might have to, there we go. And now, so you might imagine that I'm actually watching a TV show. So behind the TV broadcast and what looks like an ordinary TV to me is the power of a whole PC. So let's show a few other examples of why this can make people's lives better. The first thing is just in terms of watching TV, I now have all the intelligence of a PC available to help me in terms of switching channels and things. And when I push a button, I can have a set of my favorite channels here that I can configure. I can add channels and remove channels from my favorite list. I can browse around, and as I change channels, I can see up here what show it is, when it's on, and all that kind of information. If I want to get broader information about TV shows that are available, I can switch to the programming guide that's built in as a part of Windows 98. And actually, this programming guide is an HTML page. And what it's doing up here is an ActiveX control that displays the video signal that's being tuned to. And over here is a grid that shows me all the TV shows that are on right now. So I can browse around in here. I can click on different shows, whether they're being displayed right now or not, and over here get a preview about that show, what the TV show is about, and so on. There's lots of things I can do here. The programming guide includes a feature where I can search for TV shows of a particular type. If I want to see what movies are on, I can click on movies and so on. And I actually get a list of movies that are available right now. The last thing that I want to show you, so you can see again here how having the PC available and downloading this content can make watching ordinary TV shows better. The last thing that I want to show you is how having a PC and having all the web browsing technologies available can make watching actual TV shows even better. And what this is an example of is a TV show that is enhanced to be shown on a PC TV. This is the TV show FX, and what we've done is we've built HTML enhancements to the TV show. And as the TV show is being broadcast over the airwaves, in that vertical blanking interval, some HTML, ordinary HTML, the same stuff we've been talking about all day, is broadcast right along with the TV show. And it's displayed right around here in the edges of the show. And we actually have to wait a little while for enough HTML to get broadcast down the pipe. What you'll see are various enhancements that accompany the content of the show going on here. So for example, there's one part of the show where a character is injured, and around the outside it shows you what the injury is. And you can drill down and read more about the injury. Another thing that's kind of cool about this is you can get background information about a show. Down here in the lower right-hand corner, there's a little glowing thing that I can click on. Again, this is all HTML. This uses dynamic HTML to provide a bunch of background information about the show. So if I click on the FX Plus link here while I'm watching the show, over here I get a bunch of stuff that I can drill into details about the cast or the story. So if I go over here and click on BTS, behind the scenes, I can get information about the production. I can click on crew and see pictures of the cast and all the people who work on the show. If I click on the story, I can get a synopsis of what this show is about. Maybe I tuned in the middle, and this will help me get up to speed on what's happening with the show. I'll click back down here on the gear link. And what the gear link does is this TV show is about characters who do all kinds of special effects things and work in movie sets. And I can go and get specs on each of the different devices that they use as part of the show. So one of the characters uses a PDA, and I can get pictures of the PDA or information about the PDA. Or if I want to see the sets that the characters work in on the show, I click on sets, and I get a 3D movie here, interactive movie, that I can navigate around and take a look at the set. And even parts of the set are hot and enable me to click on them within the ActiveX movie here. And so, for example, I think this monitor is something I can click on, and it'll tell me down here about this particular aspect of the set. So really, it really does make watching a TV show a little more interactive. When you talk about interactivity in TV shows, let me give you one quick example. If I happen to have a connection, a back channel that I'm on the network all the time, then I can join a chat, for example, and actually chat with other people who are watching the TV show at the same time. And even if I don't have a persistent connection all the time, which most people don't, I can still communicate and collaborate with the producers of the show or the cast members by clicking on something like email and typing in the email comment that I'd like to make to the show and send it back to the show's producers or characters. So this is just a quick example of, if you think about the kinds of things we've been talking about all day with respect to authoring HTML and creating new types of content and new places for your content to get viewed, you can see how Windows 98 and a continued closer and closer integration of the web with the Windows user interface makes it possible for you to create content that will be viewed and useful to many, many more people as time goes by. And we think this is one example of a new venue for displaying HTML content that we'll see grow and increase in its popularity over time. So that's just a quick look at Windows 98, give you an overview of some of the things that it offers that are beyond IE4 and why we think Windows 98 will be a compelling next version of Windows.
Well, thanks a lot, Joe. That's really exciting. One of the things that makes me think of is that now the next time I'm down in Hollywood, I'll be stopped by someone and say, hey, I've got an HTML page for you to look at instead of a script.
Could happen.
Okay.
Well, thanks.
Thanks. In addition to talking about the great internet capabilities and web pages and stuff like that, and showing what Windows is doing for great desktop integration and the active desktop items and stuff, we have an awful lot of other work that we're doing with Windows and progressing it forward into the future. And here to share some ideas on what the vision of Windows is today, in the near future, as well as what's coming on down the line that you can start getting prepared for, is Bille Gates. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Robert.
So a lot of the web browsers on the internet today are using Windows systems. What do you think today Windows is offering the user community that's really important?
Well, I think that the explosion of the internet is building on top of what the PC industry has been able to do with low-cost PCs. And so as we drive those to be more powerful and even get the price down further, and connect a very high percentage of them up to the internet, the market that we're all addressing will be dramatically larger than it is today. In the Windows world, we're moving very rapidly, whether it's Windows on the server or Windows down on the client. We see those two things needing to evolve in parallel so that you can actually write programs that sometimes run on the server, sometimes run on the client. And we need rich new capabilities to do distributed applications, things like our transaction server, so you can always have the scalability and reliability that these very high volume websites require.
How important do you think it is to take and have the same sort of general interface available to people both on the desktop as well as on the server that Windows is doing?
We want to make sure that the user learning doesn't have to be repeated. If you're administering things up on the server, what you see is identical to down on the client itself. And all the information that's stored in those systems should move around very easily. In the world of computing, people have always debated whether to store things on the server or store them down on the client. And we want to give people the best of both worlds by replicating from the client to the server and from the server to the client, so that everything's always backed up, it's always available, and you can still disconnect and go portable. So whether it's your programs or the web pages you care about, you have an easy way to ask for those to be brought down onto the local storage. And having a common appearance that's now integrating the shell into that appearance, that's a central part of the Windows strategy.
Yeah, and also, like Joe was showing us some of the great stuff coming out for Windows 98, and I know we've got a lot of different technologies that we're planning for putting beneath the covers. A lot of it, people aren't even going to see on the screen. What do you think are some of the important things we're focusing on for Windows 98 and Windows NT 5.0?
With Windows 98, there are really two big themes. There's the new internet capabilities with IE, Outlook Express, the NetShow client, NetMeeting client, and then what we've done with the hardware innovation. We work very closely with people like Intel, Compaq, and all the other system manufacturers to talk about what comes next. How do we take plug and play, make that better? In this case, we've got the universal serial bus, USB, which means that instead of plugging cards in and getting IRQ conflicts, you just daisy chain off of a pretty high-speed serial bus. We've got a new level of graphics capability, the AGP, Advanced Graphics Processing capability built in. We've also got now IEEE 1394, which will eventually take everything in the living room, your digital video camera, your TV set, your stereo, and let you integrate those into a single system. So a lot of the work under the covers has been about new hardware exploitation, as well as robustness and some improved performance.
So since most of our audience is web authors and website developers and stuff, what sort of things should they be thinking about and progressing their own education-wise so they can be taking advantage of some of these great features that are coming into Windows in the future?
Well, we're learning all the time, working very closely with web authors in terms of what we should do with our tools and how we should evolve HTML. There's no doubt that HTML is going to be at the center of how people interface with computers. HTML started out as something that's fairly simple, and now with the style sheets and the large community that's coming up with ideas of what should be done there, it's amazing how quickly that's moving. We're even moving to take HTML to be the standard format for our Office applications, so that Word and Excel will both load in HTML and save out HTML. And that's so you can get very rich collaboration going on, even with a variety of document types. I think scripting capabilities and the event models that go with those, for a lot of web pages, that's going to be increasingly important. And we want the world of programming web pages and general programming to be a spectrum where you can pick the tools that you want, where you can do project management, so the people who do the code and the people who do the creative page work, you can separate those things out very easily and test how they come together. And there's a lot we can bring from our programming tools background, which is actually where Microsoft got started, bring that to this content generation, because it's kind of a blend of what we've done well with the Office tools, where lots of people have to work together, and what we've done with programming tools, where you have to debug things and make sure that all the pieces are always put together the right way.
So it's like a good cooperation between the operating system, the authors, and the tools themselves.
That's right. We're able to draw on the tools experience, the OS experience, and the Office-type productivity tools that don't require programming, and say, how can that come together to let people do web pages that go far beyond what's out there right now.
Now, anytime you talk about the internet and browsers and stuff like that, the big question about cross-platform is never too far away from that. What are your views on the problems that are facing us with cross-platform?
Well, the cross-platform issue, we can think of it in two ways. One is if you're doing a public web page that lots and lots of people from all over the world are going to connect up to, and there the only real strong cross-platform standard is HTML. And what we're trying to give people is a way of using advanced HTML that even in older browsers will come out looking very reasonable, but in newer browsers it'll look great. Now this will be fostered somewhat by having logic up on the server that will sometimes, by detecting what browser is there, pick what HTML to send down to the client. And we have tools like Visual InterDev, and many people are working on tools that make that easier and easier, as well as allowing those pages to easily connect up to databases, things like the active server pages that are a big thrust for us. And so it's all about using HTML in a creative way if you want to get out to a very broad set of machines. Inside the corporation, which is the other case, you can get a more controlled environment. You can say, I want people to upgrade to the latest browser because we're going to publish our budgets that way, and then every other application in that corporation can take advantage of the most advanced dynamic HTML or scripting because they know that's going to be there. And so we'll be making a strong push with our corporate customers to get up to IE5 because it really enables them for intranet information sharing to be at a level that is not only very rich, but should let them change their processes from having been very paper-based to now being primarily online.
I mean, that's really good information because it really helps people kind of understand where Microsoft is going as a company and saying that, that Windows isn't necessarily just the only focus, but it's also making great tools and understanding the needs of corporations as well as the bulk of end users out there as well at the same time. Well, thanks a lot, Bill. Did you have any final words you want to add in?
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming today. We're certainly excited about being part of this internet revolution. It's kind of amazing how fast it's all happening. And even though there's all this hype and coverage, I think people still underestimate what we're all involved in. 10 years from now, the way people gather information, the way they buy things, the way they learn things, it's all going to be very different. And it's fun to be part of that.
Yeah, it does constantly change, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Bill. I'm glad you could join us.
Good to see you.
We're going to be starting our Q&A session in just a couple seconds here. We're gathering all the speakers we've had throughout the day here, as well as getting our live studio audience to queue up to the microphones so they can start presenting us with questions that came up during the course of the event, getting our speakers to answer them, and hopefully many of their questions will be the same things that you're asking yourself in your theaters. Well, now comes the fun part of the last bit of the show, and that is making sure that we really address some of the issues you guys are facing. I was taking and answering some of the email questions that people had during the day. Those are questions that people sent in ahead of time. During the show, we asked people to actually email us as well, and we've been trying to gather those questions. And my question takers out in the audience have a few of those ready to ask as time goes on. But we've also got people from our live audience ready to ask us burning questions on their minds based upon some of the content they saw here in the show today. Do we have a question out there first? Leo.
Yeah, my name is Shane Jones with IntelliWorks. I had a question about data binding with enterprise applications. If we're binding it with a large inventory database table, is that going to create a problem on the client end as far as cache?
So the question was, how do I deal with bringing large amounts of data down into the client machine? So you really have a lot of options based on how you do it, because you could use the active data connector, for example, and limit through the active data connector on the data source object the amount of initial data that would come down. Additionally, the other thing you could do is to make sure that when you set up your queries, you set them up so they don't bring down 1 million rows, for example. It's not probably a good idea to bring down, based on your line speed, more than between 50K to 500K. So there are features in the data binding structure itself to limit the amount of initial data that comes down, plus in the data source object itself, you can actually limit the amount of data that comes down as well.
Another question?
Yeah, here's a question we received over email. Can the CDF files be sent to the user from a CGI?
Yeah, actually dynamically generating CDF files from server-side script or CGI is really a great way to deliver the content, and you can definitely do this.
There's a follow-up. Where can I find the CDF drag and drop editor I've heard some rumors about?
Yes, the originally codenamed Liburnia, there's a tool we refer to as the CDF creation tool, and it's in the Internet SDK, and it's also on the Site Builders Network. And there are a number of other tools also, like Front Page and third-party tools too.
Okay, next question.
I use Microsoft Outlook, and I'm confused about the place of Outlook Express. And whether do I use that as well? Do I use that instead? How do I integrate that with using the calendar and other things I like about Outlook? So it's confusing for me.
Sure. Basically, our strategy with the mail clients and Outlook is to have sort of a low end and a high end. And so Outlook Express is the low end product that does all of the great internet mail capabilities. And we intend to migrate those same capabilities into the high end Outlook that you use today for contacts and personal information management, as well as high-end mail products. So today there's a little bit of a difference because there's a lag, but you can expect to see those same great features of Outlook Express in terms of mail make their way to Outlook.
So for now, do I just use Outlook?
For now, yeah. For now, except for the sending of HTML pages, I would just use Outlook. That's right.
Okay, next question.
Next question we received via fax from Mark Angolin with the Airline Pilots Association. Question is, supporting 2 different interfaces running on Windows 95 may be an IS nightmare. After installing an IE4 desktop, can you switch between the old Win95 desktop UI and the new Internet Explorer 4.0 UI?
Absolutely, you sure can. In fact, we have gone to a bunch of work since we released the last platform preview to make it easier for you to do that in a very clear way. We have an options dialog now that's available off the start menu where you can set options, and you can either work in web integration mode or in classic mode. And classic mode works just the same way as it did in Windows 95. So if you're concerned about training and you want to ease people in, you can switch to classic mode, get them new features, and over time migrate them to the new web way of working.
Okay, next question.
We should also introduce Yusuf Mehdi, who is IE Marketing Director, just so everyone knows who he is. And I'm going to give you a real zinger here that we've gotten in several emails. I'll sort of paraphrase here for you.
All right.
Why should I target IE4 when your market share is so low?
That's a great question. A lot of chuckles in the audience. A good question. Basically, there's sort of 2 ways to look at the market. Certainly there's the installed base, which is a very important base. And then there's, of course, sort of moving forward. And in that front, some interesting points are that IE4 and IE3 today is really the fastest growing browser. We are seeing that more people are getting IE3 today than any other browser out there, both in terms of downloads, in terms of shipments with OEMs and ISPs. So it really is the most popular, fastest growing browser out there on the market. And for IE4, that's also continuing. In fact, Sites like CNET and ZDNet have said it's the #1 download from their websites today, beating all other software products, including products like Quake. So we're having good momentum. It's really growing fast, and I think that combined with some of the stuff you saw today with active channels and the ability to really create something that's breakthrough is a good reason why you want to make an investment and bet on IE.
Okay, next question.
Okay, here's another question from fax from New Jersey. It's from John Cloninger, who asks, what will all of this new technology look like in other browsers? For example, IE3.0 and under Netscape Navigator and Communicator.
Well, so actually a lot of the stuff that we saw today with dynamic HTML, specifically the Amalgamated Widget Corporation page that we customized, that had both rollover effects and outlining effects. We've specifically designed a lot of the features in IE4 so that when you bring them up in any other browser, Communicator, IE3, Netscape Navigator version 3, you still get a good experience. You'll still see all the data, but maybe not quite as an interesting experience. For example, with rollover effects, you'd see the text, but you wouldn't get the effect. With outlining, you'd see the outline fully expanded to begin with. So we intend to build functionality into the product so you see the data on other browsers, but you get a great experience on IE4.
Okay, next question over here.
Yes, excited about what I saw today. Big question with Microsoft's renewed commitment, financially even, with Apple. I'm curious about how some of this great stuff is going to find its way to the Mac platform, particularly things like active desktop and channels and things like that.
Okay, on the Apple Macintosh, we do have a very big commitment to providing what we hope to be really the best of breed browser. And on the Macintosh, we are committed to provide this great usable browser in terms of searching, et cetera, and also support for key content standards like you learned about today with HTML and CDF. So you can expect to see channels and a great browser on Apple Macintosh as well as other platforms. In the area of shell integration, that's a harder one, and we are constantly improving our relationship with Apple, and we're talking to them about what we might do there. And Joe might jump in and correct me if I have some other points. So you can expect to see really a great browser and support for your content centers on the Mac. See the Internet Explorer on every Macintosh that goes out the door now, and hopefully in the future, even tighter and tighter integration on the desktop.
Thanks.
Here's the last question I have. It's on a lighter note with a little bit more of a marketing bent. What do those 4 red dots on the IE logo stand for?
Well, first of all, those are orange dots. And second of all, that's a secret. Actually, it is actually a number of things, but primarily it's a little bit of fun to really spice up the E logo and to signify that IE4 is a big leap forward for us, and that's why you see them up in the sort of exponential notation. And when you see some of the marking, I think we're going to have some fun stuff. You'll see the dots come into play. But the other stuff is secret, and that will roll out later.
You have another question over there, Leo?
Yes, Tim Beauchamp in San Francisco, California asks, if subscribed content contains applets that get data from the server, where will they get the data from the will they get the data from the cache when offline?
Could you repeat the question again?
If subscribed content contains applets that get data from the server, will they get the data from their cache when offline?
Right. It depends how a Java applet in a page retrieves its content in offline mode. So there are a number of things to be careful about and make sure that the page and the Java applet are offline aware. You can, if the Java applet has the ability to retrieve contents locally, you can certainly put in a CDF file any data and have that automatically retrieved and downloaded into the cache. And by that means, you can get all the information locally from the machine, even when offline.
I just wanted to jump in with some details. It's actually pretty easy to modify some properties of the JavaNet object to go ahead and read data directly from the cache as if the connection were still up and running. So it's pretty easy to simulate being connected without too much change to your Java code. And we'll be making that information available pretty clearly in the software documentation kit.
But to a certain extent, that really fine-tunes the fact that as you're writing these applets for the web, regardless what browser they might be used on, you need to think a bit more closer of how you're actually getting to that data and what to happen if for some reason that data is not available. Next question.
Yes, a few more questions just came in fax. Will IE4 address the discrepancies in implementation of JavaScript and JScript?
So really, there's two efforts going on right now that Microsoft is involved in that try to really get towards browser compatibility. When people talk about, a question that we hear quite often is, does Microsoft support JavaScript version 1.2? Now, there's really two parts to that question: JavaScript, the language, and then the HTML object model. And in fact, the much more pressing thing is the HTML object model. As we talked about earlier, the Document Object Model Working Group in the W3C has actually been established to define the object model that all browsers hopefully will support if they subscribe to standards. And actually, ECMA, a European Manufacturers Association, has recently defined what the language for JavaScript itself is, and actually the new name for it is ECMAScript. Now, very interestingly, if you look at the ECMAScript specification, there's absolutely no reference to HTML whatsoever. The language and the object model are two totally separate things, and Microsoft is participating in both standards groups to ensure that we have the standard language implementation and the standard object model implementation.
Next question.
Yes, I work for a large corporation, and we have an explosion of documents and stuff that we're dealing with. And my question is how does all this relate to the efforts to manage your documents and feed them up to the delivery vehicles in browsers?
There's probably a lot of ways that we actually address that. One way that I'll talk about is today you might have a lot of documents that live on file shares or servers like NT servers or Novell servers. And you might also be developing an intranet. And your intranet is probably based on HTTP servers. And those things today are separate. One of the nice things that IE4 offers as a client is a way for you to create web pages that are views on your file shares. So if you have file shares where people are creating documents and saving them, you can create HTML views on those and drop them in the folder. And anyone using IE4, when they visit that folder, will see the rich HTML view. That's the web view feature we talked about. One of the nice things about it is that it links your intranet with your file share network. So that's one way that you can provide richer, more meaningful views of sets of documents for people who are working on an existing infrastructure that you're taking time to migrate to an intranet or that you intend to leave in place. There's probably other ways that we're addressing that other people might want to comment on, but that's one.
Okay, next question.
A question from Todd in Minneapolis. The question is, will I be able to deliver, quote, sensitive data on an active channel? If so, how do I keep unwanted fingers off the stream?
Yeah, since we've really made an effort to retrieve content in the same way that Internet Explorer retrieves content when you're actually browsing a site, so over the HTTP protocol, we're actually able to support lots of features like HTTPS. And so we can actually, you can subscribe or have a CDF file point to HTTPS or SSL connections and have that content brought down. And if the user has accepted certificates and there isn't UI that needs to come up, we'll actually put that in the cache, and that can be viewed by the user when offline. And all of that gets encrypted, so you don't have to worry about people on the network viewing your information.
Okay, next question.
Brian Barnett in Atlanta, Georgia wants to know, how will Front Page 98 integrate with IE4.0?
So Front Page 98 will actually support a lot of the extensions in IE4. Not very specific about what exactly they're looking for, but you'll see a lot of the animation and other tags and style sheets supported in the next version of Front Page.
I think the key point to remember there is as web browsers are taking and adding functionality and capability to what they're allowing HTML authors to write, the tools vendors who are writing the tools to make HTML authoring easier are constantly playing catch-up to that game. And so it's going to be very difficult to have two tools, whether it's Front Page and IE4 or something else, come out simultaneously with identical authoring capabilities, especially during a beta cycle. But Microsoft really stands behind the advances we're making in IE4 and how HTML is turning into a standard through the W3C and stuff like that. And all of our tools are very strongly focused on making sure that their next versions support as much of these advancing standards as humanly possible. Any more questions?
We got one more here. What are you doing for people who create channels? Why should I do one?
Couple things there. First thing is we're providing a channel guide that ships with Internet Explorer 4.0, and that is really a phenomenal opportunity for folks who create channels, because that channel guide is accessible from every desktop that will go out with IE4 and for Windows 98, and that's a great opportunity. So there's a great reach opportunity. We also have via the Site Builders Network, a nice way to sign up and get that channel logo and put that on your site. And the final thing is that we're going to make a big splash out of it with IE4.0, and so we're going to create some excitement behind it, and I think a lot of users are going to go out and try it.
Okay, it looks like that's all the questions I have from our studio audience. I wish I could toss a microphone out to the other theaters out there and get some of the burning questions you might have in your mind, but hopefully we've already dealt with those with the questions here we had here. Now, for one thing I'd like to thank all of our speakers for spending this time with us all day long and answering questions and giving us their insights. These speakers are developers on the teams that are actually writing the tools you're going to be using, whether it's IE4 or some of the other capabilities. And so they've taken time out of their busy day to assist us here in getting this information as soon as possible into the hands of you, the audience, while you're needing it before IE4 can ship. Now, some of the other things that Microsoft is doing to make sure that you have the information you need is publishing information up on our website. If you go on to www.microsoft.com/MSDN, you'll get an awful lot of information there on how to develop applications that utilize Microsoft products, whether it's the tools, the operating systems, or even some of the other applications we have as well. Another great site is www.microsoft.com/sitebuilder. And this is a site that's specifically targeted at making sure you have the latest information about all the advances we're making that are of specific interest to site builders such as yourself. We have documentation up there about dynamic HTML, about channels. We have a webzine up there with a lot of great articles written about websites and how they're utilizing some of these capabilities, how you can share that information and make great websites yourself. In addition to that, all of the things we talked about today, the information on other websites, on where to go for more information regarding Worldwide Live, on channels, on dynamic HTML, on the direct animation. We're going to be putting that information up on the Worldwide Live website, and that's www.microsoft.com/events/wwlive. I'd also like to take this time to bring to your attention a set of educational training courses that's being offered by the 32X Corporation. This is a set of training courses that is very much targeting the same sorts of things we've been talking about today. They're going to be talking about dynamic HTML and channels and diving in depth, almost on a one-on-one basis, with how you as an individual web author can really take your own personal site and add these capabilities to it. I highly recommend you take a look up at their website, www.32x.com, and find out about the courses they're offering so that you can take and get the direct information you're needing to make your websites as exciting as possible. Well, that essentially brings this issue of Worldwide Live to a close. I hope you took and enjoyed the information we presented with you. We really tried really hard to make this information as technical as possible, stay in code as much as possible, so that you as authors, you as website developers, found the information that you needed without a lot of marketing fluff to get your websites online and exciting to your users. We try to keep the information simple and yet in-depth, showing what the key features are without glossing over too many things. We hope we provided you with a very enjoyable experience, and we hope you come back to the next Worldwide Live coming sometime soon. Thanks a lot.